It's time now for the political analysis of Fromm and Fuller. Al Fromm, former political advisor to President Bill Clinton, and Craig Fuller, former political advisor to both President Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. Good morning, all. Hey, Craig, let me start with you. It seems to me that there's a lot more definition now about which team is taking on which team in the Republican Civil War and who's going to dominate that party for the next 2 to 4 years. And it's starting to look like a Trump, Lindsey Graham versus McConnell and Nikki Haley kind of division. Is that your read of it? And who's going to win this?
Well, I'm not sure the Republican Party is going to win at all if this sort of infighting, perhaps an uncivil type of war, continues. I'm not sure it's going to continue. In fact, I would bet that it wouldn't. I think that McConnell will ultimately find little satisfaction in attacking Trump. Trump will do anything to stay in the news, but I think he's going to be less newsworthy going forward, not more. And the puzzling thing to me is where leaders in the Republican Party really will end up or want to end up as the midterm elections are approached in 2022. And I say that because it's the old story about scoring in hockey by skating to where the puck is going to be. I just don't think that attention in spring, or let's say of 2022, certainly summer 2022, is going to be where it is now. Donald Trump will have all sorts of issues he'll be contending with, legal, financial, otherwise. He will have less of a platform on which to stand. And really, if the Republican Party is going to elect candidates in primaries that come from kind of a Trump side of the party, they're going to have a hard time winning general elections. And ultimately, politicians worry first and foremost about themselves. And winning is the name of the game. And so I think the shift will come to something more closely aligned to policy or policy differences with the Biden administration, and perhaps move a little towards the middle. But that's where I see the puck going. That's where I'd be skating. Who knows? It's a wild game out there, and the time will tell.
Al, do you share all of that?
I guess I have a little bit of a different take. I mean, I must concede that Craig knows the Republican Party a lot better than I do. But I actually think if there's going to be a fight for the soul of the Republican Party, as I heard Larry Hogan say yesterday, it's going to be between the past and the future. And in a sense, I think McConnell and Trump and Lindsey Graham are all on the same side. They're on the side of the past. And they're really trying to protect the old order. We talked last week and before about how the country's changing. And the Republican Party is really trying to sort of secure the power arrangements as they were, not as they become or where they're going. I mean, they represent a declining base, basically a white Christian base in America that is now represents a minority of voters. I mean, I was stunned. I mean, we know what the presidential elections have been. 7 of the last 8 popular votes have gone Democratic. That's not a good sign for Republicans. When it was going the other way, I was out there trying to change my party a lot. But believe it or not, the 50 Republican senators, the 50-50 split, you think the country is evenly divided. Well, basically, the Democrats represent about 62+% of the population, Democratic 50 senators. The Republican 50 senators represent about under 38%. That can't go on forever. So what I think you need is a new generation of Republicans, and it may be people like Adam Kinzinger, it may be Nikki Haley, even though I read that long profile on her last week and couldn't quite figure out what she was. She's got a wonderful story, but she's all over the lot in loyalty and political strategy. So I don't know where she's going to fall out. But I think the key is going to be people like Governor Hogan and the Republican governors, because they've actually had to govern in a real world that's changed. And I guess the first thing I'd suggest they do, I think I said last week they should form an outside group, and I believe that. They're not going to change it in the party. The party, it's so clear, is dominated by the Trumpites that you can't even vote for impeachment without getting censured by your state party. So it's got to be outside, and they ought to start with what I call reality therapy. It's the hardest thing for a party to do, to sit down and analyze why you lose and be honest about it. But if you aren't honest about why you lose, you're never going to change your strategy. As far as Trump goes, he's a loser. He lost this last election by 7 million votes. We forget that he lost the popular vote when he won the presidency by 3 million. That would not ordinarily be, that would not ordinarily be a particularly close election. He made the 2018 elections about himself, and the Democrats had the biggest majority in the cumulative vote for the House they've ever had. What Craig said is right. He's got a loyal base. He can disrupt and win GOP primaries, probably with his candidates, but they don't. But those candidates can have a hard time winning elections in anything but the most red states. The problem for the Republicans with Trump, he's not going to go away easily. He's got to be buried face down, and they missed their first chance when they left him off the hook on impeachment. Susan Collins on the first impeachment said, well, he's learned his lesson. Well, yeah, he learned his lesson, double down. And we saw that again yesterday. So the best hope for the Republicans are probably going to be, I predicted Trump would fade away, and I think it's true, because the best hope for the Republicans are Democratic prosecutors who might put him in jail. But I don't think Mitch McConnell is the answer to the Republicans. And I really believe the Republicans need to leave both Trump and Mitch McConnell in the rearview mirror.
Al, sticking with you, the other thing I wanted to talk about was the Senate filibuster. And the fact is that maybe for the first time that I can remember, there's a lot of awareness about the impact of the filibuster on legislation now. And you think it's time it should go? What's your thoughts about that and the political prospects of that happening?
I've always been against making systemic reforms for short-term political purposes. So I start there. I just leery of that, because you always have unintended consequences. I mean, Harry Reid probably didn't believe that when he let a few judges go by getting around the filibuster for a few judges in 2013, that he would wind up not being able to stop cabinet appointments or Supreme Court nominees. But that's, when you go down that path, you go down that path. So I'm generally against it. But I think there's a special case that has made me reconsider my position, not on the filibuster, generally on legislation, but for what I would call a Democracy Restoration Act. I think we need to get beyond. We can't allow a minority to continue to filibuster the country's movement toward a representative democracy. I gave you the numbers before of 62% of the population represented by 50 Democratic senators. You go to some states like Wisconsin, and in the legislature, because of gerrymandering, the vote is 50-50, maybe a little bit Democratic, and 65 or 70% of the legislators are Republican. I'm sure there are states where that's the other way, but since the change has really become a more multiracial, more multicultural democracy, that sort of leaves the Republicans in a position. And so and they've got a strategy of voter suppression and gerrymandering, because they still do control a lot of states. And I think for that one instance of a voting rights, sort of a democracy restoration package. It may be worth eliminating the filibuster because country pays a big price when it can't live up to its greatest ideal, which is being a representative democracy.
Craig, you have the final word on this.
You know, there's a lot to recommend change, I suppose. On the other hand, I think I would stick with it as it is for the time being. I think the real need is for Democrats to reach across the aisle to Republicans and Republicans to work with Democrats. If you get rid of the filibuster, it just seems to me you're going to add more division. You're not going to bring any more unity. You could suggest that maybe that I'm a bit partisan because Republicans are now in the minority, narrow minority in the Senate. But I actually think the path forward would be better served by having more collaboration between those Republicans who will join with the Democrats and demonstrate that a number of Republicans are capable of, in fact, helping the governing process. If it doesn't happen, again, I think Republicans will pay a high price, and there'll be even more calls for ending the filibuster. But for the time being, I would stay the course and hope that these leaders in both parties can find some ways to do things for the people, which at the end of the day, on all the exit polls, the voters want action from their government that is helpful to them. And just stalemate is going to and should, in fact, penalize all of them during an election. So I don't know. Let's see where this can go as it stands. There's so many variables. Let's not add one more would be kind of where I land on this one.
Craig Fuller, Al Fromm, thanks a lot.